Don't forget to subscribe.
In today's study, we are going to go over current events and how prophecy is being fulfilled. We will take a deeper look at how our democratic republic in the U.S. is being undermined and how the Constitution is under attack. Now, we realize America has become extremely divided with strong views on both sides, the left and the right. We are coming from the perspective that traditionally Adventists have always come from, that of preserving religious liberty, the idea that all men have an unalienable right to freedom and liberty for all. Let's get started. The very first thing we need to understand is what is at stake in this political game of chess. We need to understand, number one, that this is not a game. This is not about left versus right. It is only about the Constitution of the United States. Long has the attention of the world been called to the principles of religious liberty, enunciated by the author of Christianity and incorporated in the articles of our federal government, and in turn became a part of the American Constitution. But a new day seems to have dawned, and one is led to inquire whether we shall maintain these beautiful principles of liberty given us as a heritage from the pioneers of the Advent message, or shall we, like the Jews of old, reject any message God may choose to send us and persecute those who dare to accept it. So every Christian, if he would be obedient to God's commands, must be loyal to the country in which he lives. Wherefore, as Christians in America, devoted to God and consequently loyal to the just principles of this free government under God, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And so long as Old Glory unfurls itself as the emblem of the inviolate principles of its Constitution, so long is our pledge of allegiance to it an inviolate thing. So that means Old Glory is another name for America or the flag. Okay, Old Glory. As long as it doesn't violate its principles, right, of the Constitution, you're saying then our pledge of allegiance to it will not disappear, basically, as long as it is true to the Constitution. We're to obey, right, our governmental authorities, and we are to pledge allegiance to the United States of America and the republic for which it stands. We know that was established through the Constitution. We know the Constitution is divinely inspired. Christ is basically the underlying author of the Constitution and of our government. So as long as America remains committed to that Constitution, that piece of that gives us liberty and freedom, and in particular religious freedom, we are to have allegiance to it. But if it begins to violate, there's an implication there that at some point we would not have to bear allegiance to it if it begins to destroy that Constitution. Let's go further into this. So inspiration tells us that our duty as Christians is to uphold the Constitution, as it was not merely inspired by man, but by Christ, the author of religious liberty. Our obedience to earthly rulers, presidents, and statesmen hinges on this loyalty to this divine idea. Indeed, every American president, law enforcement officer, military officer, and politician is sworn in by this solemn statement. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of whatever office they're being sworn into of the United States, and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So that's what our president says. That's what every congressman says. That's what every law enforcement officer says when they go into office. That's what every every employee of the federal government has to say this. Okay? And they have to swear in. And they all declare that they will protect and defend the Constitution. So right now you're going to see that the three branches of government are being severely tested as the changes being instituted in the United States at a rapid pace are on the executive level, but are purposely challenging the other three branches. But the Constitution is easily changed, as you can see by this infographic. There are only two ways the Constitution can be amended. The first way is that an amendment or change can be proposed by 2/3 vote in Congress by both houses. So we have a 2/3 vote. There's two houses in our Congress called the House of Representatives and the Senate. So 2/3 of all the representatives in both houses have to agree to the amendment that is proposed, but that has to go through a second step. The amendment has to be ratified, and it can only be ratified if 3/4 of the 50 states ratifies it or signs it into law. So 3/4 of 50 is 38 states. So at least 38 states out of 50 have to agree for this amendment to be ratified. The second way is that it can be proposed at a national convention by Congress when requested by 2/3 of state legislatures. So that's 34 state legislators out of 50 have to propose the change. And then again, it must be ratified by 38 of the states. So it's not an easy thing to do. Since taking office on January 20th, 2025, Trump unleashed a series of executive orders, and he's still doing this, directives and firings through the executive branch that have shaken up the entire U.S. government. So the government is set up of the U.S. is also set up by the Constitution. The Constitution describes the way our government will run. And how it's ran by three branches of government, and they're supposed to provide checks and balances so no one branch can become too powerful. We have the legislative branch, which is the two houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. We have the executive branch, which includes the president, the vice president, and the president's cabinet. And then we have the judicial branch, which includes federal courts and the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. So Trump has been testing the limits of the executive branch, and we're going to get into detail how he's been doing that, wielding its power in a manner not seen before in American politics. Many government watchdog groups have been alarmed and assert that constitutional violations are abundant in the president's recent directives and executive orders. Trump's challenges to the U.S. Constitution bring to bear the weighty responsibility of ensuring fidelity to the Constitution, which ensures freedoms and rights to all Americans upon the judicial branch. Okay, why is it coming down? Why will it come down to the judicial branch? Well, some say that what Trump is doing is the White House's aim. It's his aim to force all these issues, all these executive orders in controversy up to the Supreme Court. President Trump and his cabinet are hoping that the Supreme Court rulings will solidify their attempt to establish a conservative government. So Republicans, the conservative party in the U.S., have won both congressional houses and could quickly pass legislation with a Republican president in office. This would bring us back to the judicial branch, the only branch that can challenge and reverse any law that Congress may make that violates constitutional law. So right now, the American government has a conservative majority legislative branch. It has a conservative president and cabinet executive branch, but it also has a conservative judicial branch.
and we're going to get into that. Here's an infographic of the current Supreme Court. And as you can see, those in the red are conservative judges. We have 6 conservative judges, and we also have 3 liberal judges that are left. This is going to become important because a lot of these conflicts that we're seeing in American government are basically going to play out in court. So we know America will repudiate its Constitution. So let's read this statement that Ellen White wrote in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 451. When Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of Roman power, when she shall reach over the abyss to clasp hands with spiritualism, when, under the influence of this threefold union, our country shall repudiate every principle of its Constitution as a Protestant and Republican government, and shall make provision for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions, then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan and that the end is near. Question. We need to look at, is that happening now?
So where are the Protestants? What is happening with the Protestants, and why are they predicted to turn back to worshiping the Roman system? First, they no longer identify themselves as Protestants. That should be a major clue that they have given up their protesting. They are now called evangelicals, and they have gotten extremely politicized. They have entered American government with religious objectives and aims to change its laws. Let's read what the prophet of the Lord said about the Protestants in the U.S. in the last days. I saw that the 2-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head, and that the decree would go out of his mouth. Then I saw the mother of harlots, that the mother was not the daughters, but separate and distinct from them. She has had her day, and it is past, and her daughters, the Protestant sects, were the next to come on the stage and act out the same mind that the mother had when she persecuted the saints. I saw that as the mother has been declining in power, the daughters had been growing, and soon they will exercise the power once exercised by the mother.
She also says, Seventh-day Adventists will fight the battle over the seventh-day Sabbath. The authorities in the United States and in other countries will rise up in their pride and power and make laws to restrict religious liberty. That's Last Day Events, page 144, paragraph 3. So I'm going to read a statement. Furthermore, whereas the beast receiving the deadly wound pictures Christianized Rome, humiliated unto death, deprived of her civil power, its recovering from the wound pictures her exalted unto life again, having regained her civil power. And as the wound inflicted by the hand of the Reformation, it could never have healed had the hand continued wielding at it with the sharp two-edged sword. The healing therefore vividly depicts the fall of Protestantism and the rise of despotism.
Before we move on, we need to look briefly at the role of the United States in helping to heal the wound of the leopard-like beast. That is, America leading its allies to create a church-state confederacy, and then secondly, creating the dreaded image of the beast, a worldwide church-state confederacy. The Bible describes world history through the representation of strange beasts. With the antediluvian world being the first worldwide empire, these beasts represent subsequent worldwide empires starting with Babylon. Half of the beasts are found in Daniel 7. The other half are found in Revelation 13 and 17. making a total of 7 worldwide kingdoms from creation to the millennium. You can see that America treads between the last 2 beasts, the leopard-like in Revelation 13 and the scarlet-colored beast of Revelation 17. But to truly understand the last 2 beasts of Revelation, you have to go back to the 2 beasts in Daniel, which represent Rome, because America is said to heal the wound on one and make an image of another.
After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time.
These 2 beasts represent ancient Rome in 2 different stages. First, as a heathen government, and second, as an ecclesiastical Christian government, church and state combined. So to understand the change that America will go through and how its own government will change, we need to look at past history. And the history of Rome and its governmental change is that it was threatened with barbarian hordes coming from the north into its territory. Pagan Rome was just about defeated by these intrusions by the Angles, Saxons, Jutes, Franks, Goths, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Huns, and Vandals. They needed to figure out a strategy to subdue these warrior-like cultures, so they chose religion, and in particular, the Christian religion. Rome had persecuted the early Christians, but their population had grown leaps and bounds in spite of this. So Rome changes its strategy and joins with the Christian church. Rome changes the Christian religion in this process to make it more pleasing to its pagan, heathen, polytheistic population, and early Christianity becomes Catholicism. And this strategy was successful because the barbarians were accepting of this new religion and converted. Rome was smart enough to divide the land for its own gain, to accomplish peace and subdue the barbarians. But this system of worship tainted the religion of Christ and oppressed the saints of God. Martyrdom occurs during the Dark Ages against any who dare to defy the edicts of the Roman church-state government. Personal freedoms and rights disappear, and dissenting groups will not have a fighting chance until the Protestant Reformation. So, this is all represented with the beast with the horned head. The beast with the horned head represents Rome in its second stage. The horns represent civil power, and the head represents religious power. But here we see an amalgamation or a combination. So this shows how Rome changes from its government, a heathen government, to a papal government. Rome reaches papal supremacy in 538 AD, and it ends in 1798 as the Protestant Reformation gains steam and power throughout the civilized world. So we must understand these beasts as representing different periods of time. The beast, which represents the United States, is sitting between these two last beasts, the leopard-like and the scarlet-colored beast. The leopard-like beast begins to rise, and the Protestant Reformation is depicted on this beast along with the papacy. How do we know this? Because the horn head is now separated, and the horns, the civil powers, are ruling the heads, and the papacy has received its deadly blow. We know the leopard-like beast started in the time of ecclesiastical Rome, yet it extends all the way to the present world. We know this because the deadly wound has not been fully healed. Therefore, the world has not wondered after the leopard-like beast. This healing depicts the Protestant Reformation failing. As we read, it was the Protestant Reformation which inflicted the deadly wound in the first place. So when it heals, that means Protestants have given up their fight against Rome. What happens as the wound heals is a church-state confederacy that happens on American soil first. Then America's allies will be led to follow her example. This happens in a time of great turmoil for America, a time when she is embroiled in a gigantic war in the Middle East at Jerusalem. This war is found in Zechariah 14. Later on, after this war, which America and her allies will lose, America again influences the powers that be in the time of the scarlet-colored beast to accept its false system of worship, represented by the woman riding the scarlet-colored beast. The woman, Babylon the Great, is an apostate system of worship. We are going to see this two-horned beast that comes up as a lamb. This is America. It comes up founded with Protestant principles of religious freedom in order to escape the tyranny of Rome. We're going to see America betray its lamb-like condition or qualities and eventually speak as a dragon. America does this in two ways and at two separate times. First, it causes the wound on the papacy to be totally healed by creating a church-state confederacy. And then later on, in the time of the scarlet-colored beast, it makes an image of the hornhead beast. That is, America copies the ecclesiastical system of worship adopted by Rome, that church-state government combined, and compels the rest of the world to accept this system. So there are definitely parallels that America has with ancient Rome. Rome was worried about barbarian hordes coming down and encroaching upon their territory, while America is worried about its growing atheistic population. It's worried about the left. It's worried about Christianity in general, and also the growing strength of communistic totalitarian governments. America wants to preserve Christianity and thereby command loyalty from all Christians in all countries worldwide. It wants this because they see Muslim governments doing this with much success, so they see strength in uniting. That's why they are going to create this church-state confederacy. But you cannot create a new heart in your subjects, as Christianity demands, through legislation, through forcing the will. For free will is the very basis of Christianity. Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man open, I will come in and sup with him." If America had not discarded the 10 Commandments, we would never be in such a demoralized state. But the churches rejected the work of Christ in the sanctuary, revealed after 1844, and as a result of that, they spiritually fell. The Christian churches claim we are under grace and the law of God is forever eradicated, and in particular, the seventh-day Sabbath. They claim this law is not needed, but it is. Although the law does not save us, Christ does. The Bible says the law is good and the commandment holy and just. It is, in fact, the law of God's universe. Christ personifies the law in action through his righteousness. He showed us how to keep the law. And we as Christians are to do the same. When we mess up and we break the law, we go to God and we ask forgiveness. But there is a rule of law in God's universe, just as we have a rule of law in our respective countries. So what more could Satan do than to bring America's downfall by creating a quasi-Christian movement that forces the gospel down people's throats? That is, it compels the will and exalts a false Sunday Sabbath, thereby trampling on the real Sabbath day and God's commandments. This is what Satan is endeavoring to do, and that's why the Bible says America will speak as a dragon. That is, it will change its law. It will change the Constitution, get rid of religious liberty and human rights in favor for a church-state government that is full of corruption. And we're going to look at how it's doing that as we speak.
So we're going to look at these rapid changes taking place. We're going to look at President Trump's executive orders, firing, structuring of the federal government. This is all happening in the Assyrian phase. And we're doing this with the goal in mind to understand if prophecy is being fulfilled. If we can identify man 666, we need to look at all these things. One of the first executive orders Trump signed was the pardon of all January 6th insurrectionists who attempted to overthrow the 2020 election results. Okay. Now, these people were tried by the Justice Department. The first thing that he did was to sign a executive order to release these prisoners. Trump and conservatives felt that it was over 1,500 defendants who had been prosecuted by the Justice Department. They felt like time served for them was enough. And some of them had really violent crimes against the Capitol police officers. This is an actual picture of what happened on that day. The entire Capitol was overrun. They broke into the houses of Congress. The lawmakers, all the congressmen and senators and women, they had to run for their lives. And a lot of them were going in there with the intent to kill them. So Trump pardoned over 1,500, and he also commuted the sentences of organizers of the January 6th insurrection who were convicted of sedition and plotting against the U.S. government. Because of what he did, he was impeached twice by the House of Representatives, okay? But he was not impeached by the Senate, the other House of Congress. So because he was not impeached by both the House of Representatives and the Senate, he was able to run again. If he had been impeached by both houses, he would not have been able to run again. So this happened because the United States is so divided left and right, which we are told not to get involved in. We're not to take either side. Ellen White says there's a corruption on both sides. Okay, but that does not mean that we're not to look and see how either side is fulfilling prophecy or attempting to dissolve the Constitution. So we have a lot of crazy things happening where a third term for Trump, an amendment to the Constitution, is being floated by Republican congressmen. And he's saying, you know, we need to get Trump in there for longer than 2 terms. Currently, U.S. presidents can only serve two 4-year terms, and they cannot serve beyond that. After that, they're done. But now this idea of having Trump in for longer than 2 terms, and he's in his 2nd term right now, so that means he would only serve for 4 years. Now this idea that he needs to be in longer than that 4 years is being floated around. And could it happen? Yes, it could, because we have a majority of conservative states. So we're looking closely at that. Trump has also gotten rid of any diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and positions in the federal government and military. Hundreds of federal DEI workers were laid off and put on leave immediately. Trump also revoked the Equal Opportunity Employment Act, which was passed in 1965 by President Johnson, along with the Civil Rights Act. This means any programs that educate leaders and organizations about minority populations or historically disenfranchised communities such as Black, Hispanic, LGBTQ, and how to overcome personal biases in hiring, it's now prohibited. Trump and fellow Republicans are using a Supreme Court ruling that ended affirmative action. That was a policy in America which encouraged employers and universities to consider minority groups when vetting their applicants. It was a way for America to combat the historical racism that took place on such a high level up to the 1960s and 70s. And so they were trying to eradicate that racism, but now all those measures have been basically done away with. Now, why is this significant? Because this has to do with the rights of private corporations. Any private corporations such as Costco and they released a statement that they were not going to get rid of of training their employees how to respect diverse communities. Now they're being sued by 22 conservative states, 22 attorneys general. That is very significant. That means that they're going to go through litigation that will cost them millions and millions of dollars because they have dared to defy the president, the executive branch. So the conservative states and the conservative state legislatures are working with the president to make sure they punish anybody who does not go along with his executive orders. This is very significant, and it's probably going to go to the Supreme Court. So another thing that happened is Trump fired Equal Employment Opportunity commissioners. EEOC commissioners are a federal agency that enforces anti-discrimination laws in the workforce to make sure employers are not discriminating based on race, color, religion, sex, pregnancy, gender identity, sexual orientation, national origin, age, disability, and genetic information. This can affect Adventists directly and Sabbath keepers directly because religion is in there. Adventists have used the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, and they also have used the EEOC, which is a commission that oversees all those laws that are supposed to stop employers from discriminating against you. Adventists have used these two things successfully to protect their rights as Sabbath keepers, to make sure they're not discriminated for keeping the 7-day Sabbath. But now it seems like Trump is trying to dismantle this. So the EEOC is led by a 5-member commission, each one whom is presidentially appointed, but typically they enjoy a staggered 5-year terms. This means they serve in between presidents, and they're supposed to be nonpartisan. Like, they usually aren't fired, just because the president was a Republican or a Democrat. So that's significant. Another way that Trump challenged the Constitution directly is he signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship. Now, he signed this knowing this is a direct violation of the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge those privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. Okay, so this is a very significant one that he did because, like I said, when you're sworn into office, especially as the president, you're saying that you will protect the Constitution from all attacks, foreign or domestic. But what if the attack is coming from you yourself? He's testing the strength of the branches of government. And so immediately when he did this, 22 states sued immediately to stop this order. Remember, the Constitution is the highest law of the land. So even if President Trump or the executive branch or any other president makes an executive order, it has to fall in line with the Constitution. But why is Trump doing this if he knows that he's going to be blocked, right? Through the judicial courts. Well, he knows he might be blocked through the lower courts, but what he is hoping that is it will go to the Supreme Court, where he has 6 conservative, loyal justices. And if they make a judgment and they say, hey, you know what, he has the right to do this, or they interpret it a different way, he might get his way. So that's what he's doing. He's testing those 3 branches of government and seeing if he can get his way through the judicial branch. That's his aim, to push it up to the Supreme Court. Another thing that happened was Trump also shut down the U.S. border, ramped up deportation, and sent over 5,000 troops to guard the southern border. The White House announced its intention to raid schools, churches, workplaces, basically anywhere for illegal immigrants, and to go after sanctuary cities. Again, Trump and the White House have threatened if any cities do not comply with his demand to go into schools, churches, workplaces, anywhere, they will face litigation from the conservative party, conservative attorney generals. They'll be sued and they'll have to go through litigation. So although America has historically been friendly to immigrants from Europe, immigrants from Central and South America are not as welcomed. Now, the Trump administration also maintains that people from all countries, even hostile ones, try to enter the country illegally through Mexico. That's the country on our southern border. So here's where the violation might come into play, okay? Critics now say that Trump's use of those U.S. troops to patrol on U.S. soil violates a constitutional protection. The Posse Comitatus Act bars federal troops from participating in civil law enforcement, except when expressly authorized by law. This is a 153-year-old law that embodies the American tradition that sees military interference in civilian affairs as a threat to both democracy and personal liberty. Okay, this law also finds expression in the Constitution's division of power over the military between Congress and the president. Okay, so no one person controls the military. Okay, that power is divided between the president and Congress, and that's in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th Amendments. So the Army cannot really be used on U.S. soil against the civilians. It's not supposed to. Now, there's some stipulations to that. People are saying, hey, does he have a right to do this? Is he violating the Constitution by sending 5,000 troops to the southern border? That's under scrutiny as well. Now, this next one is going to be, we need to know this because we are told in prophecy about a famine coming to the United States, and it might go beyond, okay? Because we're entering into what is going to be a trade war. In fact, it's already happened. The Trump administration imposed tariffs on all goods coming in from other countries, which is affecting every single industry, including the farming industry. Much of our produce comes from Mexico, and not only that, our farming supplies are imported, which means food prices will instantly go up. As we stated, under President Trump, immigration enforcement has started mass aggressive deportations for illegal immigrants. These immigrants from Mexico, South and Central America they're the backbone of our farms. They harvest all of our fruits and vegetables for pennies on the dollar of what U.S. citizens work for. And already many of them have fled their farms and their workplaces, leading up to a 60% loss of the workforce on American farms. Trump has also opened up Guantanamo Bay to detain these immigrants. Guantanamo Bay is notorious for its torture of terrorist criminals because it's not on U.S. soil and it doesn't have to abide by its law. Trump claims that only violent criminal offenders will be stored there. But some in the media say that that's not true and that Trump has opened his first concentration camp. That's what they're likening it to. There's room for 37,000 people there. So we're talking about a huge area where people of Mexican descent from Central and South America are going to be shipped. And we will have no way of knowing the living conditions there, if they're being treated humanely. They won't be under U.S. law, okay? Now, conservatives, their argument, they say that these illegal immigrants are a drain on America's resources. And these are conservative Christians that are talking like this, that a lot of criminals infiltrate our communities and take American jobs from its citizens. However, we have to look at the unintended consequences of removing these illegal aliens without discrimination. So Trump continues to, and his administration continue to dismantle the federal government. We had a whole mass of inspectors general that were fired, and Justice Department lawyers fired. He also fired key officials in the FBI. He's restructuring that because these are all independent law enforcement or regulatory agencies. And he wants to make sure that he can move with impunity. These are people that can possibly put a stop to his launch and his bid for power, okay? And if he can get all the people that would stand up against any violations of the Constitution out and put Trump loyalists in, then he can move with a freedom that we've never seen before. That's what he's doing. He's testing everything. So he's just firing and firing these people no matter what the consequence. Now, we have seen in the past week another violations of the Constitution. It's called the Appropriations Clause and Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act. The Appropriations Clause is in the Constitution. It gives Congress the power to control federal spending. Well, Trump wrote an executive order to test that, to defy that. He froze all federal aid programs, and he also offered to every federal employee, and there's millions of them, for them to resign, okay? It was blocked by a federal judge because it's not constitutional. Again, it's going back to the judicial system. And what will happen is Trump's team will go ahead and appeal it and try to appeal to the higher court until it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And what he's hoping is that Supreme Court will give him complete control over the money in America, which is trillions of dollars, of course. Will he get it? We don't know. So right now we've showed you the test to our Constitution, the attempts to dismantle our Constitution, what is going on. And that is happening by the president, sad to say, and the executive branch. But we need to go back to the statement from Ellen White, which talks about the Protestants, the Catholics, and the government getting together, because we need to take a look and see how that is coming to pass. A lot of Adventists are asleep right now because they're looking for a major movement from the Pope himself to take over, right? And to institute his image of the beast. Well, they're not going to see that. It's a lot more stealthy than that. Like, the Catholics are infiltrating our U.S. government. And if you haven't paid attention, this may shock you about how powerful Catholics are right now. Okay? The first person that's a power player and that we're going to look at, his name is Kevin Rogers, and he's the current president of Heritage Foundation. Rogers is deeply embedded in Catholic institutions, was president of Wyoming Catholic College in 2013, and activist and participant in conservative Catholic think tanks. He has been dubbed the Catholic Cowboy. Okay, he's a far-right extremist. As mentioned, he is president of the Heritage Foundation and is the brainchild behind Project 2025. And if you want to know what Trump is doing right now, he's following the Project 2025. It's a radical plan by conservatives to totally dismantle the U.S. government and change it into a religious state. Project 2025 is being implemented by President Trump fastidiously in just the first few weeks of his presidency, even though during the election, Trump distanced himself from it and publicly disavowed it. So here we have an article where a lot of people have reported on this. They've looked through this whole plan. It's over 800 pages. It goes through every department of the federal government, and it's basically trying to destroy the U.S. system of checks and balances and create more of an imperial presidency, an imperial presidency that has more power than the other two branches. Let's look at some more Catholics in the U.S. government that are going to be some major players. The second person we're going to look at is Vice President Vance Jackson. Now, Vice President Vance Jackson converted to Catholicism in 2019 and has expressed that his conversion has deeply influenced his political ideology. An article in AMP, they talk about this. They say his conversion also put Vance in close touch with a Catholic intellectual movement viewed by some critics as having reactionary or authoritarian leanings that has been little known to the American public. But where Catholic conservatives of the past have seen big government as a problem rather than a solution, is he wants a muscular government, one that the Catholics can control, and they envision a counter-revolution in which they would take over government bureaucracy and institutions like universities from within. They are talking about American government. They want to take over from within. They want to change the institutions, change the government branches to favor Catholicism and the authoritarian role of the church. Amy Barrett is a Supreme Court justice. She was one of the most recent ones voted on by Trump or appointed by Trump and confirmed by the Senate. Amy Barrett comes from an overwhelmingly conservative Catholic background and has been a bedrock of Catholic institutions and activisms. Okay. People have said when viewing her history and looking at, positions that she's taken throughout her career, they said there was tensions between her serving as a Supreme Court justice, one of the final interpreters of the U.S. Constitution, and swearing an oath to an organization. The organization that she's part of, the Catholic Order, called People of Praise, lacks transparency and visible structures of authority. So these people are deeply entrenched in Catholicism. Not only that, to their Catholic order, not only that, to the Catholic Church, to the aims of the most extreme views of the Catholic Church. We have two: President Vance, Vice President Vance, and we have a Supreme Court justice. Now, here's another justice that has been on the court for a while, Clarence Thomas. He was raised a Catholic and attended Catholic boarding school and seminary. He initially wanted to be a priest, but he left seminary due to racial prejudice. Now, Clarence Thomas is known as a staunchly conservative justice, and he votes on the conservative he votes conservative every single time. I mean, he voted with his colleagues to reverse Roe versus Wade, affirmative action, and other monumental issues. So let's talk about some of the things that these conservatives have overturned. They overturned the abortion law, they gave that to the states. So right now, You can't get an abortion in Texas. I live in a conservative state. Okay. If someone was to want to get an abortion, they would have to go to another state. But right now, Texas is trying to make it so if you do seek an abortion as a woman or you perform it as a doctor, you would be subject to the death penalty. Now, many Christians think that, we celebrate. We don't believe in taking innocent lives, but we have to look at the larger implications of what's going on. These rulings are to favor the religious right in this country. They also voted to expand the role of religion in public life. And this means in schools, in sports arenas, public places, they want to be able to express Christianity. Of course, they're not talking about Muslims. They're not talking about Buddhists. They're not talking about expanding that anywhere else but the Christian religion, okay? And we might see some conflict come if other religions that are not so popular try to express their religion in public spaces. But the Supreme Court, that's the highest court of the land, ruled in favor of expanding religion in public places, okay? And that strikes directly against one of the constitutional amendments that says Congress shall make no law respecting a religion. United States government cannot seem to favor any religion or make a law compelling anyone to do any type of religious service. And so we're reaching some dicey territory there, okay? Another ruling that happened, which allowed a postal worker to get the Sunday Sabbath off. That was a landmark decision. What they said is they expanded the undue hardship, the definition for the employer, saying that the employer has to go further and farther than ever before to make sure that a Christian can take a day off, a holy day off. All right. Now, some Sabbath keepers say, hey, that's going to work in our favor. But actually, in Project 2025, they are not planning on helping us to keep the Sabbath holy. They're talking about the Sunday Sabbath. Okay, that's what's defined out in Project 2025. They're talking about the Sunday Sabbath. They in no way intend to use it to protect Sabbath keepers. So that's another way that the court has ruled to basically strike at the heart of the Constitution. Now, I believe that we are to study the Constitution to know what our rights are, right? Because eventually it's going to come down to this fight in the judicial system. So what's going on with Protestants and Catholics joining? The Spirit of Prophecy says Romanism and Catholicism is now regarded by Protestants with far greater favor than in former years. In those countries where Catholicism is not in the ascendancy and the Papists are taking a conciliatory course in order to gain influence, there's an increasing indifference concerning the doctrines that separate the Reformed churches from the papal hierarchy. The opinion is gaining ground that after all, we do not differ so widely upon vital points as has been supposed, and that a little concession on our part will bring us to a better understanding with Rome. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So I want to try to organize this timeline so we can play out the sequence of it, and we can see from some of the things that we talked about right now, I can say that I believe the first man 666 is becoming clear. The only thing left that he has to accomplish is the church-state confederacy. So the first man 666 is the man that stands at the head of the nation represented by the two-horned beast. He is not a dictator during this time, and the Constitution is still in operation. I believe we are in this phase. Now, we know in the Syrian time period, if you look to the left where it says Assyrian phase, This is where we're at right now. We're under this beast. This beast represents the Protestant nations, the present world, how it's ruling. Okay. We know some things have yet to happen. The deadly wound has to be fully healed, and the gigantic war will break out in the Holy Land against Jerusalem. Okay, that's in Zechariah 14. Now, sometime after this war is started, a coalition will be created, a church-state confederacy, because America and its allies, the Protestant nations, are desperate to win this war. Assyria will be in the process of being crushed, losing. And this is the reason for the final push, okay, to get this church confederacy out there to totally repudiate the Constitution. And when this confederacy is formed, we know that the winds have been let go and the ceiling is over.
So how soon are we from this war breaking out in the Middle East? In my opinion, we are very close. Trump has promised, and I quote, that all hell will break loose in the Middle East if the Gazans don't release hostages and stick to the ceasefire deal they have with Israel. On February 4th, 2025, Trump met with Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and unveiled a plan for the U.S. to rebuild and own Gaza. Their plan included moving Palestinians to Jordan and Egypt, although both countries said they would not take them. This stance ends the U.S.'s neutral occupation that has been in place since 1947. Immediately, Arab states and the Russian foreign minister released statements condemning the move and the displacement of Palestinians. There are over 1.9 displaced Palestinians as a result of the war. According to an article in the Washington Post, Israel says it has begun preparations for the departure of Palestinians from Gaza, despite widespread international rejection of President Trump's plan to empty the war-devastated territory. It has been reported that Egypt has launched a behind-the-scenes diplomatic blitz against the proposal, warning it could put its peace deal with Israel at risk. Trump is also calling on Putin to end the war in Ukraine, calling it ridiculous. So he's getting in the water with Russia, but I personally don't think he has the leverage to play a strong arm with Russia. Russia already has the support of China, Iran, North Korea, Brazil, and most of the Arab states. In fact, there are North Korean troops already on the ground in Ukraine. Putin has been courting many third world countries by forgiving debt, giving them infrastructure loans, and solidifying their ties and loyalty to Russia and its allies. So all things are ripe for this war. If you would like to know more about the gigantic war that will happen in the Middle East at Jerusalem, please visit our F4 Flock YouTube channel and click on the gigantic war that will happen in the Holy Land video. So if we look at the prophetic symbolism, we can know that this beast is on its way down. It's declining. It represents the Protestant nations, with the papacy included, as we discussed. This beast is declining because it has turned away from God and the Protestantism that made it truly great. But also because Babylon the Great, the time of the scarlet-colored beast, is coming up. Communism, represented by the horns, is the next world power on the scene to dominate the world. But they will give their power to the woman, that false system of apostate worship, partly because of the influence of the United States. But eventually, as the Bible says, the horns will hate the woman and destroy her.